Welcome to today's episode of the podcast. We have with us a very special guest. She's the curator of Global Shapers Minneapolis Hub, Richa Vijayvergiya. She works in the clean energy space with Accenture and holds a degree in electrical engineering from the University of Illinois. She's a passionate global shaper and an activist at heart. Thanks, Richa, for accepting the invitation and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Achuth. I'm happy to be here.
Talking about climate challenges in Minneapolis, what are the most significant climate related challenges faced by Minneapolis, and how does the local community respond to these challenges?
Yeah, that's a really great question and a very important question. So for people that don't know, Minneapolis is in the United States and it borders Canada. So it's pretty up north, and that means it gets super cold. But because of global warming, it has also increasingly started to get warmer. So the summers are way more intense with like temperatures getting up to at least like 35 degrees Celsius. What that means in the summers is people are at a higher risk of heat stroke, and water temperatures then don't foster a healthy aquatic life. It really is interconnected to all of our lives. Not to mention the fact that because of all of the climate change that's going on, it means that we have even more severe types of weather. So when it snows in the winter, when it's super cold, there's a blizzard, right? That lasts like at least 3 days, and you're kind of just like snowed in and you can't really go anywhere. And then in the summers, the rainfall is so ridiculous that there's immediate flash flooding, which disrupts not only a residential person like myself, but it also disrupts the big agricultural industries that we have here and manufacturing. So climate change is really affecting our communities, is what I'm trying to say. There's damaging rains, the cold weather keeps getting colder, there's polar vortexes that keep bringing very extremely cold temperatures here, almost to negative 40 degrees Celsius.
Wow.
Right? We can talk about Minnesota as a whole, but it's also affected by climate change that's affecting the areas around it. So for example, in the summers, there are lots of Canadian wildfires. This past summer has been pretty bad in terms of Canadian wildfires. All of the smoke and ash that started up there has been moving very closely towards all of the states that border Canada. So that affects our air quality. That affects the quality of life that we are able to live in. So it's all interconnected. Like I can talk about Minneapolis or I can talk about Minnesota as a whole, but it is also affected by all of its surrounding areas. These borders that we've made for specific states, they're kind of arbitrary. But so those are some of the issues in terms of climate that are affecting Minnesota. But
those are a lot of issues. I mean, you have issues with respect to wildfires, issues with respect to erratic weather, issues with respect to rains.
Yeah,
Wow.
It's definitely a lot. And as I've lived here for more than 2 years now, I've seen it, even in these 2 years, get more aggressive, right? So you can see that not only is this like consistent in terms of the amount of impact that it has, but it's also increasing in the impact that it has. And, that's only for someone like me that moved here, 2+ years ago. For people that were born and raised here, they've seen these dramatic shifts and they feel it a lot more, right? I will say though, in terms of climate solutions, Minnesota is doing a really good job. Like I do think that they are trying to make active progress in these areas, right? So there's lots of different solutions that we could be talking about, but as a governmental state, right, they have passed laws or created climate groups or action plans to help make sure that we can sustainably move forward and make sure that no other people are left behind. All of these climate solutions, what I really love about them, they are trying to be inclusive, right? So there's a lot of different types of populations that live in Minnesota. And we want to make sure that no one is left behind when we're trying to take care of things like better electric vehicle charging or just the implementation of clean energy. right? We want to make sure that people that are affected the most by poor air quality, by flooding, are helped the most so that way they don't get left behind, right? So there are lots of different solutions that I could tell you about. Some of the ones that I have been closer to is there's been a huge push for clean energy. So in our local utility specifically has goals set out to be 100% renewable by 2030, and that
Wow.
means that they are decommissioning coal plants. They're increasing the amount of solar panels on rooftops and wind power. This also means that we are trying to transition away from anything that would be increasing air pollution. So, for example, here in Minneapolis, we have a trash incinerator that is used to make electricity. And people tout that as a sustainable way because instead of going to a landfill, the trash is going to be burned, right? But that's not really a sustainable source of energy because that still has a lot of air pollution attached to it, not to mention all of the other pollutants that might be affecting our water and soil. And so there's a huge push by certain groups here in Minneapolis to actually decommission that plant because it is, again, affecting lower income communities. And in its entirety, it's not sustainable, really. And it's kind of been using a lot of loopholes to get by. So there are lots of people that are working within the climate space to make Minneapolis and Minnesota as a whole more sustainable.
Wow, that's actually pretty amazing. So we actually are getting your perspectives from the US, where there is the concept of inclusion as well included in the whole policy aspect of climate. And you have been talking about all the groups that are in action, about activism, about ensuring that no one is left behind, and about the last mile delivery. Also, you are a techie. You work with Accenture in clean energy. Technology obviously plays a pivotal role in addressing this current issue of climate change. How do you see the emerging technologies and innovation shaping climate solutions in the US, particularly in areas of energy efficiency, transportation, or just like you talked about earlier in renewable energy?
Technology is truly going to be the backbone of any type of climate solution, permanent climate solution, in my opinion. There's lots of different technologies that I know of that are still, it seems like they've been in their like beginning stages for years now. My hope would be that those types of solutions and those companies get the funding that they need. So, for example, there is a thing called direct air carbon capture, and so there are a few companies that I can think of that have created a way to suck carbon dioxide out of the air using like a bunch of fans and everything, and then either being able to turn that into some type of solid form, like a rock that could potentially be used for construction, or
Yeah,
being
like
able to
like
capture
bricks,
that.
right? If I
Yeah, like
remember an article
yeah,
that I read, yeah.
hmm like bricks. And then there's the other option is um, when you're pumping out natural gas from the Earth's core, there are all these gaps that are left behind. So if you can capture that carbon dioxide and replace the natural gas with that, like that's also an option. Um, and these energies, I think these technologies are really important because they really are trying to solve the source of the problem, right? The source is in terms of climate climate change and greenhouse gases and everything. There's too much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. That is why things are heating up. It's causing a lot of problems, right? So what's the solution? It's to take it out of the air, right? And so these solutions, they're kind of almost too simple because you're like, oh, okay, we'll just remove the carbon. But that technology needs money to make sure that it can be scalable, to make sure that it can be implemented in all of the different areas that it needs, right? And that's not the only type of technology that people are behind, right? So there's in more tangible ways, right? There's things like AI can help us figure out where there are leaks within natural gas systems or where there are unknown like carbon emissions that we don't know, like that we haven't been able to trace, right? So I think data and technology is going to play a huge role in terms of us knowing where the gaps are or where the loopholes are, where things are escaping, and how we can then address them is going to be the next way we can move forward.
Yeah, essentially, in order to be more efficient, so in
Yeah.
order to build efficient solutions, you are using AI and machine learning. So there is
Mhm.
an interesting question that I just wanted to ask. You had mentioned about clean energy being used in vehicles, especially EV charging was the specific term that you had used. Do you think EV vehicles are actually sustainable as they
Mm,
claim to be?
yeah.
Because in India, we do have a lot of renewable sources, but still we do have a lot of our energy coming from petroleum sources. So even if we have to make the energy that we have to use to power the EVs, it still comes from fossil fuels. So how does it happen in the US? What's your perspective on it?
Um, it's similar in the United States in terms of the electric vehicle infrastructure that we have here. There's EVs is such an interesting topic because it has so much potential, but there are so many things that I feel are still slightly problematic about it, quite honestly, because there's a lot of conflict minerals that are used to build the batteries for electric vehicles. So when you think about the sustainability of an electric vehicle, right? I think about it in all the terms. How much money does it take, or how many resources does it take to actually create, like, going from nothing to building the full on car, right? Then shipping costs and all the carbon emissions with shipping or, whatever transportation they use, right? Then, not to mention, like you just said, how are you charging the car? What is the energy source that you're using to charge the car, right? And also, like, some people are like, oh, it'll like pay for itself, or you'll be able to, the amount that you're saving in carbon emissions by using the electric vehicle are offset by like all the different things that cost to make that vehicle. I don't believe that's actually as true. I think EVs are still pretty new on the market, and I don't know how long they're going to last, quite frankly, right? We have way more information about gasoline cars and diesel cars, and we know that, if a car is in decent working condition, it can last, maybe up to even 30 years, right? But there's a lot of things that we personally do not know about EV cars. I personally do not think that EVs are the like sustainable solution that everyone thinks they are. I do think that they are a great replacement for a gas powered car, or a, a gasoline powered car. And the reason why is really just because of the lack of carbon emissions from that electric vehicle. But the amount of resources and time and labor and energy that need to go into producing a brand new car are still a lot. And
Totally.
and you know, I think of this from a fashion sense too. When people think about, oh, like sustainable fashion brands and things like that, when you're thinking about clothing, right? People are like, oh, I want to buy organic cotton or like, natural materials or whatever it is. It is always going to be better for the environment if you make do with what you have, right? So that's why thrifting is touted as something that's way more sustainable, because you're, instead of taking nothing and creating a product, you are taking an existing product and either mending it, fixing it, or just giving it new life by using it. And I think that's more important than like everyone buying an EV car.
Totally. I
I
mean, you
would
are
much rather
essentially,
go on, go on.
yep. So essentially, yeah, those I was just saying, it is an interesting point that you made. You're just focusing on the demand side of things, how you kind of reduce consumption as well as work on the renewable aspect of circular economy.
Yeah.
Very interesting points that you made. So I also want to ask, since, I seldom get sustainable engineers to talk to, we in India have, an ambitious plan to have hydrogen powered cars. And interestingly, the Minister for Transportation, he uses a hydrogen powered combustion engine car, of Toyota, if I remember correctly. And we do have such an ambitious plan, National Hydrogen Projects, it's called. So what do you think about hydrogen? Can it power the future? Because, we do have the existing delivery systems in order to transport the gas, in order to ensure the last mile delivery.
Yeah.
Can it actually
Hydrogen.
be a sustainable alternative?
So hydrogen is also a very interesting topic. My concerns for hydrogen come from the fact that it is very much related to water. And so a lot of the different types of, you can talk about different types of hydrogen, right? There's green, there's pink, there's blue, there's lots of different colors of hydrogen to basically say how the hydrogen is produced. But a lot of it means, okay, you have to go through electrolysis where you're taking water and breaking it down into oxygen and hydrogen. Now, my problem is that we're already going through a water crisis where there's way more droughts in the world than we've ever had before. I would much rather people have water than have hydrogen. In my opinion, the solution to a lot of this like transportation is I want better, more reliable and safe public transportation that is so easy to use and so affordable that people don't have to think about it. People don't have to think about getting a car, right? Whatever insurance comes with it, right? They don't have to then drive it. There probably would be less accidents if everyone was just going on a bus, in my opinion. Less cars on the road, things like that. And then, but I do think that hydrogen has uh, a big place to play in the long haul trucking industry. So
Totally.
in America, there's a lot of resources. You can think of vegetables, groceries, a lot of different things that are still transported by huge trucks. And I think for what hydrogen can do, I think long haul trucking is definitely an area where that hydrogen would be a way more sustainable source. But for personal, like for a single individual type of thing, I want more accessible, more safe, more public transportation. Again, that's like so reliable and so well connected that I don't even have to really think about it.
That's actually a very interesting take on it. Going to your personal projects at Global Shapers Minneapolis, can you give some interesting projects that you've been working on? So we had a conversation about this earlier, where you were having an intervention project in agri space.
Yeah, so our project is with this group called Farm Buds. They're a nonprofit that work in the Twin Cities area. And the Twin Cities refers to both Minneapolis and St. Paul, which are sister cities that are right next to each other. Um, and our goal with this Farm Buds project is really there are a lot of different immigrants and refugees that have come from different places in Africa to Minneapolis, and they want to be able to harvest their own vegetables from their own homelands, from their own cultures. And so Farm Buds is a group that basically helps first generation immigrant farmers to be able to set up their lives here, right? So, you can buy a plot of land and you can grow all the different vegetables you want, right? But sometimes you need
Wow.
help, you need manual labor help, right? You just
Well, I,
need
I just
more
had one
people.
question over there. I just
Yeah.
had one, something just popped off my head. I know that US is having, stringent laws when it comes to invasive species or species that are not native to the specific domicile. Are there some kind of an issues, like can you actually plant some species of cereals or something else that was there in some other part of the world and bring it without
Yeah, so that's
much
actually a really good
policy
point.
issues?
But you know, like I said, agriculture plays a really big role in Minnesota's economy. And so
Okay.
there are lots of different unions of farmers. So there is a like Sudanese farm group that connects all of the Sudanese farmers in the area, right? And all of the purposes of these groups is not only to make sure that people have their home community in a foreign land, but also to make sure that they're doing it in an ethical way, in a safe way for the environment, and regarding invasive species as well, right? So, they want to be able to plant certain things that you can't necessarily find at the grocery store. Like, for example, okra, which is a great vegetable. You can find it a lot in India, and in Africa actually. But you don't necessarily find it here. But that doesn't mean it's invasive. It just means that it's just
Wow.
grown here, right? And so
And
people want to be
that's
able
a very
to
interesting insight.
people just want to be
And
able to grow like things like okra and like, there's lots of different varieties of pumpkins and like squash and everything like that that are also native to the Americas. But because of lots of different commercial agricultural farming, they have been like weeded out because, they don't grow well or like, they don't taste good or like whatever it is. But they've been weeded out based on a specific taste profile that does not match the immigrants that are coming in that want to be able to grow their own food. So I don't believe that invasive species is the problem here. I just think the diversity in what we eat is a little limited. And so there are coalitions of farmers that specifically work to make sure that whatever they're planting is safe for the environment that they're in. But Farm Buds is specifically there to provide resources such as free manual labor, because that's honestly sometimes the hardest when you're coming to a foreign land with just a few suitcases. You don't know anybody. This is a way for you to build community. And I think it's something really important to be able to connect with community and share a meal with the things that you've grown from the earth. I think it's very humbling. And so Farm Buds, I really, really appreciate that project. I've met some just really high quality people, and you just get to connect with people on a really deep level when you're talking about helping them make sure that they have a livelihood and that you get to share a meal, you get to learn about a different culture, and you feel connected to the people around you in a way that I feel like is a lot harder to do sometimes in the day and age that we live in. So that's Farm Buds.
well, that's actually a very interesting project. So it's at the intersection of a lot of things. You're also looking at it from a humanitarian assistance perspective, relocating migrants, assisting migrants. You're also looking at it from an organic farming perspective, ensuring that farmlands are actually sustainable. You're also looking at it from an inclusivity perspective, ensuring that everyone gets access to the food that they love.
Yeah, we had
Awesome.
previously we've had other projects related to sustainability, and like one of our project leads did a food waste diversion project where basically, in a lot of catered events, right? Think a wedding or like a work event or something like that, where there's a lot of food left over. Generally, that food would just go to waste. Like they literally threw it in the trash, and there's plenty of people that could be eating that, and so the whole entire project was about diverting that food waste, right? So there were people that would come to
Wow.
collect all of the leftover food and then transport it to a food shelter that would then pack it up and then be able to distribute it out to people that need it. And it is it is so simple, right? Getting food to people that need it. Everyone needs food, right? Like it is such a basic human thing. And
It's
there's
like a
so many
unifying factor.
yeah, yeah. And there was so much wastage that was going on. And this project, it became so big that the food shelter that we were working with, it's like one of the top 5 biggest food shelters in America. They have now made it like an inherent program as part of that. So you can call them and be like, "Hey, I'm having a wedding." Or like, "Hey, my wedding just finished and I have, this is the amount of food I have. Would someone be able to come pick it up?" And they will pick it up for you and they will distribute it. You don't have to worry about it. And they have ensured that it will go to people that need it, right?
Wow.
And it's just like it's such a simple concept, but like implementing it definitely took a lot of work. But I am very, very proud of the projects that we have done. Like it I don't know, there's in my hub, which I really love, there's this really big sense of community that we have to give back, and we want to include the community in the process if we can. And so the projects that I mentioned, I feel like are a really good example of that.
Totally. I think it reflects the values, that we stand for as
Yeah.
global shapers. Just to wind up the whole episode, in your opinion, what's the one pertinent way in which an ordinary person can contribute to climate action and promote sustainability? I know that you had mentioned about, ethical consumption and the renewable aspect of circular economy, but, you know, your thoughts on this.
Yeah. So I will say ever since I got your questions, I have been thinking about this question so hard because I was like, oh, what is the best way to like optimize impact and everything? And this is also something that I struggle with as someone that has climate anxiety, right? So I am, I can say all of this, but I know it's a lot easier said than done, but something is better than nothing, right? So I think the, after thinking about it for so long, I think the, I think that what I've come to realize is maybe two or three things. One is
Okay.
working with what you have, so reducing your consumption. You don't have to buy the next best thing, especially if the thing that you already have works really well, right? We don't need the trend-setting pants because they're going to go out of style in 2 weeks. We don't need like all of the different skincare because half the time it doesn't work or your skin will just break out because there's like so many products on your skin. Being a little bit more conscious about the consumption that
Okay.
you're doing. And I don't mean to shame someone to say like, oh, like if you need a new phone, like yes, go and get a new phone. What I'm saying is if you have the iPhone 14, you don't need the iPhone 15 right away. So reducing consumption. And then the other thing is also reducing your meat consumption. Um, in just like from a pure uh, metrics point of view, meat, in terms of what a human is consuming, meat has the highest carbon emissions. So if you can reduce your meat consumption, that would bring down your carbon footprint by a lot. Now, I'm vegetarian. I've been vegetarian my whole life. So is my family, right? So I am, maybe people will be saying that I'm biased, right? And you can say that I'm biased, but there are numbers that back it up. In what I have seen from some of my friends, which I think they also like, is some of my friends also don't like to prepare the meat themselves. Like they're just like, oh, it's like, you have to worry about the bacteria and contamination or like whatever it is. So at home, they'll do the lentils, the beans, the tofu, whatever it is, right? They'll be vegetarian. And then when they go out to eat, they'll treat that as the experience to eat meat, right? So reducing your consumption that way, people have called it being like flexitarian. I think that's a very tangible way that people can consider their food consumption. Um, and yeah, just making do with what you have and reducing your meat consumption. I think those are the two main ones. Oh, the other one was walk.
Okay.
Um, like just in terms of transportation, right? In America, there is a huge driving culture. Um, and a lot of cities, like I'm from Los Angeles, like Los Angeles was built around the car, right? And so I understand that walking everywhere isn't an option, but if it is an option, definitely take it. If there's public transportation that will get you there, try it out, because the more people that use it, the more your governments are going to see that people need it, which is how they'll get more funding for those projects. And it's like a catalyst to bring change. So those are my three things.
Totally, totally. So we do have, three tangible takeaways that anyone listening to this podcast can rely on. Thank you so much, Richa, for joining with us in this conversation. And we extend you all the best for your curatorship tenure as well as to the activities of the Minneapolis Hub of the Global Shapers community.
Thank you. It was so nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.